So what are we doing so far? Well, I apologize, I don't have similar data for France, but I can show you the data in the United States. This was a study released by the Bipartisan Policy Group. It's a think tank, a nonpartisan think tank in the United States a year ago. This shows you the amount of money that the oil industry spends on R&D as a function of total revenue. So, and that we sort of juxtapose that with other industries that just sort of help everybody get grounded, because I'm sure most of us in this room can relate to some of these industries. So pharma, not surprisingly, takes 20% of what they make and they sink it right back into R&D. And you can see that it goes all the way down here. When you get to energy, we're talking about 30 basis points. 0.3% of revenue is reinvested in R&D. So it's not a particularly innovative field. Let's look at it another way. Let's take the 2010 US federal budget, which, as we pointed out, has not been balanced particularly well, and ask where those dollars are being spent. The reason I included this slide was about a week ago I was asked to speak with the energy advisors for one of the presidential hopeful candidates in the United States. And we kind of went through the whole, this sort of discussion. And the woman who really knew her stuff, very sharp, said to me at the end, well, what are you saying? Should we be spending more? Should the government be spending more money on this? And I said, ma'am, I am not a policy guy for a reason. I don't know the answer. But I'll tell you what you are spending now. You've got some hard decisions to make, and this is it. This is what the US spends money on. We spend a lot of money on a lot of programs, all of which have their merit. But that's how much we spend on energy. And you can see the part of it that's R&D, the little red thing. So the only thing I would ask one to ponder is this enough? If this pie, this square pie, is finite and it can't get any bigger and it all comes down to reallocation, these are the tough decisions that people have to make. And I'm not one of those people. I think many of you either are or one day will be the people making those decisions. But you have to think through that, because we don't live in a world of infinite resources, neither economically nor oil-wise. But something has to give, because what I do argue is what we're doing is not enough. The oil companies do spend a significant amount of money on exploration, which is the first half of what we call E&P, exploration and production. But let's be clear, that money that they're spending is to do the same thing they've done 100 times before on a new field. And that's very important. It generates the highest return on investment for the oil company. In fact, that's the most precious dollar you spend, and that's how an oil company is evaluated financially. It's for every dollar you spend on exploration, what is the yield on production? But what I'm arguing is that that's not enough, because when that oil runs out, and whether it's going to run out in 20 years or 30 years or 40 years, I don't know. But when it runs out, what are we going to replace it with? And to find what we're going to replace it with, we need a new technology that doesn't yet exist at that technology readiness scale. So to wrap up, I think it goes without saying that this is a global problem. And a lot of you have asked great questions that have brought that home. For example, if everybody in this room and all of our respective nations reduce our consumption of oil, is it enough? I don't think it is. For countries like both of ours that are heavily dependent on importing oil from somebody else, are we doing enough? I worry that we're not. I worry that energy security is going to become a problem that increases over time. So what do we need to do? Well, we have to change the way we think about this problem. And we touched on this from an investment standpoint. But again, it's worth noting, over 90% of the dollars, both public and private, that are invested into alternative energy are invested into technologies that are already ready. Solar, wind, these electric cars, they're all great. But do we really want to put 90% of our chips on the table where we sort of know the answer? Or should we be working on something else? So what does the world need? Well, the world needs people like you. The world needs government leaders who are going to prioritize what actually works, what's going to fill the gap, and what will require the investment over a long period of time. We need military leaders who, in the United States, we're very fortunate in the Secretary of the Navy, Ray Mabus, someone who is very forward-looking on this and is committed to seeing this happen. We need business leaders who will see the potential to do this and work with governments, for example, using programs like loan guarantee programs. And we need technology leaders, people who are willing to sort of talk with their feet and say, I'm going to go and try to solve one of these problems.